So now I'm using no more gaps to fill in the little holes and cracks around where this plug of foam is. And in a minute I'm going to use my finger and I'm going to make sure all of the little Swiss cheesy holes are all nice and full, because I'm going to coat that then with Plasti-Dip. But for now, lovely sunny afternoon, everything's nice and dry. Going to do the same with all of this, just make sure it's all nicely sealed, and no more gaps doesn't actually seal it, but it does provide a base for the Plasti-Dip, as you will undoubtedly see. I don't want oh yes, and I've got to do the vents underneath. I cut these obviously quite ambitiously, but right now they're just going to be closed off. I don't want water soaking in underneath either. Now this is the Plasti-Dip. I'm just going to give it one coat. It'll be completely fine. I think I touch a couple of bits up a little bit more, just where there's some cracks, but apart from that, that's going to be it. Looks quite pretty, and it is nicely sealed. I'm just using some Ballasting here to glue lead into the bottom of the boat. No big deal. I could use epoxy, but honestly the Ballasting works quite nicely, and I do know at the end of it all I can easily cut it off should I need to. Now here is the finishing touch for the servos, the hydroplane servos, is to put an O-ring on there so that when I screw that down it squashes the O-ring. I don't think I need that. On the other submarine I haven't used it at all, but you know, why not? Why not just put an O-ring on here just to make doubly sure we're not getting water into the gearbox housing of the servo. So that's it, and it moves quite freely, and honestly nothing's getting through that. Absolutely nothing. So we're putting it in the tank. You can see the light under there turning on. I'm just keeping those hydroplanes tucked in. That was a nice idea, but of course in order to use the ballast tank I have to have them open because of the way that I've made this. So it's filling with water quite quickly. And it's pretty clear. There's a fair way to go. Now I should say that before I've put this in the water, obviously I've got the trim tanks with the right amount of water in them. I've got the piston at the right spot where I want it to be for neutral buoyancy, which is almost all the way withdrawn. So I'm just using the ballast tank now, filling the tank up and getting a sense of where the lead needs to be so that the boat will begin to come near neutral buoyancy. And we're starting to get there, as you can see, but it's still stern heavy, bow light. But at this point, it's not looking that bad. And there goes the main pump. I'm now beginning to see how it's going to look surfaced once the tank is emptied. So now I've actually added the self-leveling device. You can see it winking just between the motors there, and you can see how that works, so that when the bow goes up, the hydroplane goes down to lift the stern up and make it all level. That's all pretty nice. It's working beautifully. This is a micro gyros self-leveler. I think they're probably the best. So I've got this now I've got this now in the water, and it's now quite bow light and bow heavy, and I discovered this is the reason. I've got a crack in my cylinder. I have no idea how that's happened. Hello there. Coffee early in the morning. I was going to run the submarine this morning for its first run, but not so. I put it in the test tank last night, which I'm tripping over here, but I'm going to get on there anyway. Put it in the test tank last night. It went down. Tried to bring it back up. It sort of did, then stopped, and then went back down again. And I suddenly thought we're in trouble. And what it is that this is the control room here, and there's an enormous crack in it. It was leaking like a sieve. So I had to find some more of this. This is acrylic, and acrylic is good. It's also, as you can see, brittle. So I ended up replacing it with this, which is Lexan. It's not quite as clear, but it's as tough as nails. It's going to last forever, but the internal diameter is not quite the same. And I thought it's not going to fit on the reducer properly, and it's not going to fit on the motor room end cap all that well. It does, it goes over the O-ring, but it's not tight enough. So I'm going to use some butyl tape under the control room O-ring, and I'll bring it up and make that work. But as for this, this is my reducer. I bought this black tarry stuff, and they told me it would set to like rubber. Well, that doesn't work. That's a waste of time. So I'm going to have to make another reducer. Okay, this is pretty simple how to make a reducer. It's not actually a reducer, it's a coupler. I'm going to cut out a 25mm block out of the plastic I've got, stick it in a lathe. I'm going to turn it down, get it all nice and smooth, and it's all going to line up to be the same outside diameter to the roughly to the because I'm actually going to be coupling together some acrylic, the old acrylic tube for the piston end, and the new Lexan. This is going to be going on to the old acrylic tube, so I'll make that size. Then turn that down a little bit more, and this time very carefully make it a really nice sliding fit onto the acrylic tube. Once I've done that, as you've seen me do this before, we then cut the slot for the O-ring. If the O-ring is 200mm, then this slot is going to be 180. You give 10-12% compression, that's enough. Take another 4 or 5 thou off there so that it's a sliding fit, and we're done, apart from putting a hole through the middle. That end's done. Then we turn it around in the lathe. A lot of fun doing this. You've got this nice rough end now. Well, you've got it like that. That's the rough end. You've got this, which is the outside diameter, and then you've got the piece there, and you've got the slot, just like that. I'm going to just machine this down so that it's all nice and smooth. Then I'm going to machine this down, but this time I'm going to make sure that this is a nice, tight sliding fit into the Lexan. And then I'm going to start opening out this hole until I've got, probably I want about 5mm there, just for strength between the bottom of the O-ring and the internal flow through there. But then I'm going to have that all done. And then I can stick it on. Now the thing will be here, if I've got 25mm, I really only need, I reckon, 6 to key onto that Lexan and get glued in place. I only need about 2 for that little spacer in the middle, which leaves me with about 17 at this end in which to put the O-ring, and I'll put it in a little way. I'll put it right in the middle so that there's plenty of play. There we go. Let's go. So let's make a reducer. Got my lovely chunk of plastic here. Just a normal woodworking saw. I'm just going to cut this down to the point that I can easily hold it in the lathe and start the process. Lovely. So I've turned it down, and I'm just working on this now. You can see how fine the cut is that I've taken off this. I think it's 1.5 thou shot or something. Just getting it down slowly, and that is beautiful, if I say so myself. So now we, as you know, now we can simply dig the cutter in and cut the slot for the O-ring. I'm using a torch, as you can see on my cross slide here, just to make sure I know exactly where I'm up to, because it's a little bit dark. And now I'm just going to use a ruler. I think it's 6mm across. I've just got to get that right, and ruler's good enough, believe me, that'll be fine. As long as the depth is nice. That's the O-ring fitting, that looks terrific. And yes, I'm very happy with that. That's lovely. So now we're just boring out the inside. I've turned down the outside to the right width, and this of course makes quite a mess. Just getting the edges cleaned up. You've got to be very careful doing this so you don't take a finger off, but there you go. It does happen. If it happens to you, don't let me know. I don't want to know. So this now is the butyl tape, which I'm going to use to build up, and I've already done that. You can see that how thick that interface is between the O-ring and the Lexan tube. And this is the new connector that we've made. It's all glued in, and that's the incredible mess that I've made in this process. Yeah, I don't really stand on extension cords, or maybe I do.